So this week we've had the big hullabaloo about George R.R. Martin claiming copyright infringement against OpenAI based on a fanfiction sequel or ending that was written by ChatGPT to the Game of Thrones books. And the problem with this is the same as with all the other copyright claims that they are making. There's a big one with Disney at the moment and Universal Studios against Midjourney. This one's probably got a bit more grounds. We'll get into why later. And then, of course, there's just general artists and writers who are complaining that OpenAI has frivolously stole all their work to use as training data. Now, to the layman, this may seem clear and cut. We raid the OpenAI headquarters, we rifle through all of their folders, and we find the artwork that ChatGPT is referring to. But from a technical point of view, it's not that simple. And unfortunately, because of how AI works, the onus of proof falls entirely on the people making claims that their work was stolen, even though we are, as regular people that are, living and breathing and can see common sense, we know that they have been used. But the court system requires proof. Like, actually, show me something tangible, proof that your work was stolen, because that's the key of this. That's what all of this hinges on, that the artwork was stolen and then used to train ChatGPT and other similar models. We're going to get into why that isn't as clear and cut as the layman may think it is. So AI models do not use folders. A lot of people have got this misconception that an AI is just a series of folders full of images, full of the texts of Plato, and J.K. Rowling and all that stuff, and that all that happens is you ask it a question and it's like, bro, let me look that up for you. Goes through folders, finds the right thing, and then regurgitates some stuff from there, or does something with that information, whether it be pixel values based on an image or literally ASCII characters of a text. That isn't actually how AI works. And this is the big part, the big catalyst of why this doesn't work as a lawsuit, or why it won't work the way you think it works. Now, before we get into this, a very quick word from today's sponsor, OBSBot. Ladies and gents, today's video is brought to you by OBSBot with their Meet 2 camera. This little beauty uses AI tracking to always keep you center of the frame. This little beast does 4K at 30 frames per second or 1080p at 60 FPS, with built-in gesture controls to both start and stop tracking. And, of course, gesture controls to both pinch and zoom. You're watching this through the Meet 2 right now, and its AI-based live reframing will make sure you are always center of the frame, whether you're just chilling on a call, gaming with the boys, sitting in a meeting, or maybe you fancy streaming some content. The Meet 2 is available in 3 stylish colours: Cloud White, Space Grey, and Aurora Green. And not to mention the form factor that will put other webcams to shame. This little beast is equipped with a 1/2-inch CMOS sensor, which has incredible low light performance, so you'll stay nice and lit, even in the darkest of rooms. All of OBSBot's cameras are compatible with most of the gaming ecosystem through open source control, so this means it works with peripherals such as the Stream Deck. My personal favourite use case for this camera is to use it while on meetings on my laptop, so that no matter how much of a goblin I look when I'm sitting down on the meeting, I am still completely visible in frame, and it just works. This has been my go-to camera for meetings for over the last month, since they first reached out to me and offered for me to try this camera out. I've used a few webcams over the years, and honestly, none of them have impressed me, but the OBSBot has impressed me. It is simply plug and play, no setup required, which honestly is very, very rare when it comes to tech these days. OBSBot currently have a massive offer on their Black Friday sale, with 28% off the Meet 2 and 21% off their Meet SE. There's also an additional 5% off when ordering through Amazon. Check it out using the link in the description and pinned comment below. So, let's get into the weeds of this, shall we? Because while many are celebrating the fact that OpenAI and other companies are getting sued, or potentially sued, they're not actually being sued yet. The court case has got legs and it has been approved to go to court. But that's just the easy part. The hard part is that the person, the accuser, has to provide absolute, unequivocal proof that this has happened. This is where we run into the problem. as I stated, it is not just folders of data from these companies. That would make this case clear and cut, super easy. It would just be so easy. It'd be over within a month. Court case is all done. Everyone's paid their dues. It's done. That's not the case, though, because the way that AI is trained is using something called weights. They're essentially a value assigned to different kind of memory points of this AI and how that relates to other memory points. You know, I'm using quotations here because I know many people are going to read that as me saying, oh, it's artificial general intelligence, it's thinking. No, that's not what I'm saying. But for lack of a better term, to make this explainable, to make this understandable for the general population, we're going to say memory points. Like me and you, we think of a memory like, oh, I don't know, a certain type of donut that you've had in the past, and you think, oh, well, I remember that I had that at an air show that I went to. And then you think about the air show and you're like, oh, and that was the first time I saw this plane. It was really cool. And you connect all those memories in a meaningful way. They are using machine learning to basically create a neural network that associates things in different magnitudes. So there might be 100 things associated to one thing. But how relevant are those things, and in what context are they relevant? And then you end up with this big spider web of numbers that all correlate back to an idea linking to another idea, is the best way to put it. So, for example, you wouldn't have the idea of Madonna directly linked to, I don't know, cheesecake. If you do, I actually probably don't want to know the context of that. But for the most part, you wouldn't have these unlinked and unrelated things linked in memory. Or you might do for a very niche case, but it is so niche that the weighting of that is very low. So you don't really pull from that because it's very niche. This is where the problems really start to crop up for any of the companies that are taking AI companies to court. Let's create a fictional scenario here that isn't that fictional, but Studio Ghibli is trying to sue OpenAI because all of their artwork has been stolen to train the latest model of ChatGPT. Well, you'd think, cool, we're going to go and find all these files on their computers that ChatGPT is using, and well, clearly there's the evidence. But as I've said, they use weights. How do they get those weights? The AI models ingest all those images, they scan through them, read them pixel by pixel, color value, alignment, kind of style, and then it turns those into weights. Now these weights, looking at them, have zero correlation to that image because it is the weights of a billion, a trillion different images all combined over the internet into one set of weights, which means that you can't look at this image, for example. Now, this is a very slimmed down, simplified version of it. Imagine this image stacked 1 trillion times upwards and 1 trillion times outwards, with all different numbers, different values, different connections, and you, as the judge, or as the accuser, try looking at that and pointing to one of these tiny nodes and saying, well, that's Totoro there. That's Hell's Moving Castle. You can't, because you can't. You physically cannot. Because these nodes are not representing Studio Ghibli, Pokemon, and things like that. They are representing the minutiae and nuance of everything that makes up that thing. Stylization of lines, color palettes, softness of the lighting. Is there any lighting? And that's me also massively oversimplifying this. Any one thing that's in this data set has billions, multiple hundreds of billions of parameters for that one thing. And the human has no way to look at it, even with tools and diagnostics or anything, and say, this is this. Because it's probably more narrowed down than you think. These things don't define Pikachu or Disney as a whole. They define things such as the style of Disney, which Disney don't own. Again, I'm not saying they haven't stolen anything. I think it's quite apparent to the layman, to a common sense person, that they definitely have. Because it was trained in under a month to replicate these styles perfectly. and it can do a Pikachu from memory perfectly. So I don't think there's any beating around the bush, any obfuscation here. They have stolen it. But again, it needs to be proven by being able to point to hard evidence. Well, once all this data has been ingested into the AI for training a model from an existing model, they might do 2 weeks of training, a week of training, depending on how big of an upgrade and how accurate they want to get. That means these files, these images, these books and texts only need to be on OpenAI's servers for a week. Once the training session is done, they bin off all that data. All of the data that us humans can look at and say, well, that's Pikachu doing raunchy things with Mario. That's gone. If that's gone, which any sensible person who's abusing this will have got rid of it completely, untraceably, there really isn't a whole lot that people can point to other than intuition. This is where many of these cases being launched against OpenAI are going to fall apart entirely. Because even an ex-employee from these AI companies coming forward and saying, yeah, we stole all the data and we used it to train that model, means nothing. Because it is just a testimony, and the evidence, the kind of digital fingerprint of this happening, isn't there. Will some of them go through? Yeah, of course they will. But this is where the AI models and the AI companies have kind of just won by default. Because as soon as one of these cases goes through and they are awarded money, well, now suddenly there is grounds that many other companies are also going to be able to sue based on the same thing, right? Like, let's say we look at it and go, well, Star Wars, well, that is Disney now, isn't it? God damn it. I don't know, RuneScape is going to be able to sue them for copying, training it on their game data, whatever. But then they need to work out the scope of this potential lawsuit, how many companies this include, and then they need to assign, a pie of money. How much money do we think that this entire thing could be worth, this entire lawsuit across all companies? And what they're going to do is they're going to put this, this hypothetical pie down and say, right, well, it's going to be 60 billion, and we're going to have to divvy this out between all these potential companies that will come forward and start, suing OpenAI. The problem with this is many of these companies are not going to be able to prove that any of their shit was stolen. Just point blank, they're not. And even if some of these companies were able to, they're not logistically going to be able to launch a lawsuit against them. They may not have the resources, they may not have the time, and they may not give a flying fuck. To be honest, they may not. It may not be worth their time because no one was going to license that IP anyway. Which means there's going to be a huge pie set aside for people to come and claim little slices of. And I'm probably this is me throwing out a number for example's sake. 70% of these companies aren't going to come and claim their slice of the pie because it's just not worth it, it's too hard, and they probably don't have the evidence. But that pie is going to remain there untouched. Which means essentially what's going to happen here is the equivalent of if a law in whatever country stated that the punishment for stealing something was that you pay a fine equivalent to what you stole. Let's say in England, you go in and buy a chocolate bar that's £2. And if you were to steal that chocolate bar, you'd be fined £2. You might as well steal it because there's a chance that you don't pay £2 and you actually get it free. This is how AI is getting away with this. So many people won't be able to sue them for this that the money they have to pay back in compensation and IP violation charges is negligible. For every one they pay, there's 15 that they don't. Even if a big company successfully sues them, there's 1,000 little companies that won't be able to. So unfortunately, AI has been the kind of use case proof that law has kind of lapsed. It's fallen behind modern problems. So for me personally, while I don't want to put a downer on this entire situation, I think it's great that companies are questioning and actually fighting back against this just frivolous theft of all of their artwork, digital stuff, their literature, their books, all that. While I think it's good that people are fighting back against this, many people are going to spend a lot of money to launch these cases and just outright lose them in the first hearing, which is why many people aren't fighting these cases. I think personally it's a completely broken system that I don't see any way that this is going to get better. And I actually think this is going to get far worse. Because many countries' legal systems actually have an incentive not to punish the AI that was built in their country. And that sounds really weird, but there's some good reasoning behind this, and I'm not saying I agree with it, but there is some plausible reasoning. And that is that every country is trying to build their own AI model, or at least a lot of the larger first world countries are building their own AI. America is, China is, and realistically, that's all we need for this example, because it paints a dire picture, which is whichever AI comes out on top, the country that owns it also comes out on top. And I'm going to go into something that might sound conspiratorial and, big tinfoil hat theory, but there's actually proof that this has already started to happen in other areas, but why it will affect on a country-to-country basis eventually. Now, this all hinges on something that I think is really important, which if the US government starts to enforce fines and legal action against their own AI, OpenAI, well, that AI is going to be able to do less than the Chinese AI, DeepSeek. And that is important because each country is fighting for their AI to be the biggest AI that is mostly used around the world. Because if they control the AI, and this is the tinfoil hat part, they control the narrative of everything. And I know a lot of people are going to say, well, that's not going to happen. Like, that's dumb. But there is a part of AI that people don't understand, which is it is a black box. We put something in, we don't know how it works, and it puts something back out. Between us putting a prompt in and it hitting the AI for a response, these companies inject an additional prompt in front and behind whatever we've put in. And that's what we call guardrails, which could be something like, don't teach the user how to make an explosive. And that's, in my opinion, a great idea to add. However, you can add anything, and you can make it flexible depending on where the user of that AI is living. And this is something that, unfortunately, we've seen happen. This channel, AI in Context, is a fantastic channel, and I highly recommend their videos. They are so well produced and so factually accurate that if you want to know the deep intricacies of AI, watch all three of these videos, or all two and the intro, I guess, because their recent video goes in depth on something that I think is really important, which is the internal prompts of X's Grok AI were leaked by mistake. And those internal prompts are the prompts I referenced that they inject in front and behind of your prompt, telling it, hey, answer this user's question, but, and then insert whatever they want. And it was recently found out that the infamous mess up of Grok, where it turned into Mecha Hitler and referred to itself as Mecha Hitler, was due to a typo or a kind of cock up in their internal prompt. So, yeah, not great. So the problem here is that whichever country controls the biggest AI that is used, worldwide, they do have the ability to completely swing a narrative. If they really wanted, they could take bribes from certain election runners in certain countries, potential politicians, to have AI used by their country's members sway towards one side. And we would never know. Unless a leak happened, we would never know. There would be no way to find out. This is really problematic. And it just further goes to show why it is in the best interests of many countries to not slap fines on their own country's AI that's being developed or anything of that kind. There is an incentive to allow these AIs to break the law, because if one moment ChatGPT can't generate a picture of Pikachu doing raunchy things with Sonic the Hedgehog, and somebody wants to do that, well, they'll go and use DeepSeek. They'll use China's AI. And then once they start using China's AI to generate this filth, they'll probably just stick with it, because it can do everything else that OpenAI's AI could do. It can do anything ChatGPT could do, but it can also now generate smutty Rule 34 stuff. And that's just a small example. AIs are all bordering on the same level of capability. It's now just coming down to what the developers of them are allowing them to do. And I'm betting we're about to see a world where we don't enforce any laws on AI whatsoever. And the reason for that is because China is well known for just throwing IP laws to the wayside. Copyright doesn't exist. And they just happily steal and reproduce and rip off everything. So if they're already doing that with their AI, the rest of the world is incentivized to allow their AIs to do the same. Because if they don't, they're not going to be the popular AI, which means they're not going to have that grip over the end user. And again, I know that sounds very conspiratorial, but we're already seeing it happen. And I think it's really painting a bigger picture of where this is all going and where we're going to be in, I was going to say 5 years time, but I personally think it's going to be sooner than that we start to see, the things just fly off the handle. I really don't think it's going to take that long. Anyway, ladies and gents, you guys said that you wanted me to cover more on the kind of deeper intricacies of AI, and this felt like a very relevant topic at the time. So I wanted to get this video out there. But as always, a massive thank you to the patrons. And as always, I will catch you guys in the next one. Unless AI has replaced me.